Welcome. My name is Chris Mattia. My amateur radio call sign is Whiskey 6 Alpha Hotel. And this is WaveTalkers Live, episode number 41. Today we're talking about deployment preparation or deployment preparedness. How do you prepare to deploy out and support your community with your amateur radio or other means? I'm joined today by two of my esteemed colleagues, Dan, NR6V, and David, who just left the room, but here he comes, W0DHG.
He's back.
Hi, everybody. Had to mix my soup.
And we are the WaveTalkers. So let me pull these guys down real quick. And oops, let me do that and then do that. There we go. And let's get into this for today. Let me switch the slides over and pull that off and put myself down in the corner so it's a little easier to see what I'm doing. There we go. And let's get into it for the day. So as usual, if you have access to Winlink, if you could go ahead and send us a Winlink check-in, send it to all three of us, W0DHG, NR6V, W6AH, and our tactical call sign, which is WaveTalkers. Be sure to use the Winlink check-in form, the standard Winlink check-in form. We'll walk through that here in just a second. And today's question is, what real-world scenario or scenarios is your deployment kit either built for or likely to be needed for? So here in Southern California, for instance, some of the most common things that we're going to be building our deployment kits for is going to be forest fires, earthquakes, possibly flood evacuation, maybe even tsunamis. But in different parts of the country and different parts of the world, your kit is going to need to be customized for your specific needs. Maybe you've got hurricanes in your area or tornadoes or other sorts of things. So let us know what real world scenarios your deployment kit is either built for or likely to be needed for. So let's take a quick walk over to Winlink, and we'll walk through that check-in process just to make sure everybody's on the same page so everybody can participate here. So you open up Winlink and you're going to come up and click on the new message button here in the upper left corner, then click on select template. Always keep in mind that every time you launch Winlink from scratch, it's going to check and make sure you've got the latest version of Winlink, you've got the latest version of the forum. So that's always a good practice to make sure you're in all the time. Now, with the template manager open, you're going to click the plus next to that standard templates. You're going to come down here to where you see mapping GIS forms. Go ahead and give that a click. Down there at the bottom, you'll find Winlink CheckIn.txt. Just go ahead and give that a double click. Your web browser of choice should open up for you. It looks something like this. If you've previously saved your settings inside of your web browser, remember those are saved by your browser. They're not actually saved by Winlink, but you can do that. You can save that. If you do, and regardless, everybody should go ahead and click on that date and time. It's going to insert the current date and time for your check-in. That way it'll map correctly. And this is a good practice to do inside of an exercise as well. It's pulling that date and time directly from your computer. So go ahead and do that, hit OK. This is an exercise. You can tell us which band you're connecting on. It's a good idea to practice different bands and different operating modes. Go ahead and select those as you need to. This is where you put the all of our call signs and our tactical call sign. Just separate those with a semicolon. Here's the top information. That's all pretty standard. Make sure you've got the latitude and longitude. This is the place to enter in your answer to today's question. What real world scenarios is your deployment kit either built for or likely to be needed for? Go ahead and fill that in, hit the submit button. You will get an option to change the name of the form. You don't have to do that. You can just say, okay. It'll go ahead and close your browser window, populate the email message. You're going to post that to your outbox, all the standard Winlink stuff that we should be practicing all the time. Then you're going to open up your session, and I'm going to open up a Telnet session. I'm going to hit start, and it looks like, yep, there we go. We've got check-ins coming in from all over the place. We'll go ahead and download those and send in your Winlink check-in, and at the end of the show, we'll map all of those so that we can see where everyone is coming in from. And we really appreciate everyone checking in every week. We do read every single one of those messages. and respond to all of them. It may take us a little while to get through them all for the week, but it's really good information to kind of see what everybody's got with the answers to the questions. And it's great practice to make sure your Winlink is operational in the event that you need it. So today we're really talking about being prepared for a deployment. And this really comes down to one primary question, and that is, what is your mission? What are you likely to go to do? It's related to today's question of what's your kit likely to be? Well, what is the mission that you're going to be supporting? And that brings up a couple of other questions. First of which, who are you supporting? Is it your community? Is it your family? Are you supporting a hospital? Are you supporting a Red Cross shelter or another type of shelter? Who is it specifically? Get as specific as you can with who you're likely to be supporting in the preparations for being able to go out and do a deployment. This is going to lead you to, what do you need to bring with you in order to support that mission, support those people or that you're going out to support? How do you organize all of that gear? Just because if you don't have something with you, then you can't use it. If you can't find something that you've brought with you, you can't use it. You can't utilize it to support whatever your mission is. So we'll talk a little bit about the organizational structure of your equipment that you're bringing. And finally, how do you transport that gear? For some scenarios, you're going to need to transport that gear in a vehicle. In other scenarios, you might need to use a bicycle or use a wagon or put it in a backpack and hike that gear in. And all of these things are going to determine how you're able to support your mission, the people that you are supporting, and what you need to bring. And one of the biggest keys to success overall that we can suggest is to make sure you are actively practicing deploying. And you do this usually by doing different practice deployments by supporting different events. And the different events that you support are going to help dictate the gear that you're bringing with you and how you're going to prepare. So let's walk through a few of these scenarios first. And let's say the first one is you're supporting some type of one-day event, some small event small event as in time-wise, not small as in number of people or scale of the event. So here we're supporting a marathon, and the types of equipment that we're likely to need, the types of things that we're likely to bring with us are going to be things like our radio, battery kit. You always need power. You always need an antenna. You need some kind of support structure for that antenna or some way to deploy that antenna. So these are the kind of like the common things that we all think about that we definitely need. The next is going to be paperwork. This might be various forms that you have. If you're deploying with an incident, you want to have hard copies of the incident forms that you're likely to need to fill out to maybe turn in to your agency, to your group. You might need paperwork such as maps of the area, the rule book, the guidebook, important numbers and information. When I think about the paperwork that I bring with me, I have all of that. I've picked up one of these. This is just a little small, basically it's a portable office. Really, it's a little file box. It's you can open it up and it's got space inside to put some of the common paperwork that you might need. There's a little space underneath to be able to put copies of things like your license in there, maybe a little small notebook, pens and paper, and so forth. And then it's got a little clipboard on the top of it. So you've got a writing surface to be able to operate with. I'm a big fan of using things like colored gaff tape in order to label my information. So I've got, who I am and who this item belongs to, kind of what it is, all right on the outside. You may want to have your your common frequencies that your group operates on or so forth, kind of embedded inside of something like this. You can pick these up pretty much anywhere. Home supply, office supply stores. You can get them on Amazon. It's just a simple little portable office. It's an aluminum box, and it works really well. On one of the first deployments that I ever went on, one of the operators had something like that. I'm like, wow, I want one of those, because that looks really helpful. What else do we have? Whoops, that's backwards. I got to go forward. There's the paperwork. Next would be shelter, table, and chair. If you're going to be setting up and operating, even for a one-day event, you're going to need to be comfortable to be able to do that. So, you want to be able to create some shade or shelter out of the weather just a little bit. Those easy ups, or even just a simple tarp, can work really well. A very small portable table is sometimes really helpful. You could get away with a small writing surface like the little box that I was just showing, and a little small like camp chair kind of thing, something to be able to set up, because you're going to be sitting there or operating for an extended period of time, even just for a one-day event, and you want to make sure that you are taken care of. That leads to the other sorts of like personal care items that you're likely to need for a one-day event. These are probably going to be things like water, snacks, sunscreen. Don't forget sunscreen. That's usually one of the first things that I forget with all of my gear. Things that are going to help you stay comfortable and stay operating. So how are you going to transport this stuff? Well, more than likely for a one-day event, you're going to carry it in a small backpack, and you're going to probably get to the event. You might, if it's a local event in your community, you might walk and carry that gear with you. You might load it onto a bicycle or pretty much any vehicle to be able to transport that gear for that type of an event. It's generally a smaller type of an event, and so your gear packs down a lot smaller. But what happens if you're supporting a much larger event, maybe one that's out of the area? This is from Baker to Vegas, when we go out and we support that race. That race takes place over 100+ miles of desert. It's a really broad area. So everything you take with you, everything that you're going to need, you need to carry with you to both support your mission, support the people that you're supporting, and sustain yourself. And so you need to take that into consideration. So if you think about an event like this, when I went to this, the first one that I went to, I was a roving support person. And so I operated out of my vehicle. So much of my deployment preparation was configuring the radio system inside of my vehicle, because I was going to be mobile, moving around. So I knew I was going to need things like VHF and UHF comms to be able to monitor, but there was also a need at a particular one for some HF communications. So I had that rigged into my vehicle. Let's say you're deployed at some type of an event, and you're coordinating delivery services where you've got trucks and so forth coming in to the area, and you need to coordinate with them. More than likely, they're not going to have ham radio available to them. They may have a CB radio. So I had one of those installed in my truck as well, so that you've got it. You can provide that communication link, that bridge of communications between any of the different modes that you need to operate in.
So is that your truck, Chris?
I'm sorry?
That's your truck?
This is my truck.
Oh, cool.
This is my Ranger. This is
Awesome.
how I oftentimes have it rigged. So on this particular mission, my mission was to actually support medics that were out in the field using a variety of different equipment. That was kind of one of the key parts of the mission that I was out there to support. So as part of my preparation, as part of the preparation, when you need to go to something like this, start thinking about things like what type of power is going to be needed. You may need to make yourself more informed and aware of solar powers and solar charging and battery, and how do you maintain those batteries, and what type of equipment do you need for that. I ended up deploying all of this gear to support that particular station in order to keep that station on the air for that time. Your mission may include the need for you to troubleshoot equipment. So you might need test equipment and know how to use it, such as a multimeter or other different types of electronic or other types of test equipment. Start thinking about what you would need in order to prepare and support some of those items. What basic tools might you need? This is part of my my basic wire creation kit. So if you go back and you watch the Power Pole Everything episode, these are a lot of the same tools that we talked about in there. And I used all of these during that particular deployment, you need to bring your ingenuity and your experience, because when you get out on a deployment, oftentimes you can't just order something from Amazon. You can't run down to a local Radio Shack or electronics store. You have to be able to leverage the resources that you have on hand, the components that you have on hand in order to solve problems. In this case, there was a medic's vehicle that didn't have a 12-volt socket in it, and we needed to be able to plug the radio in. So I hacked together some different wiring bits in order to plug the radio that we had into the battery, direct wire the battery in the vehicle. And so you might need to come up with some of the stuff on the fly. And so it's a good idea to really be aware of how you can leverage all of that gear. This is perhaps the most important thing that you're going to bring with you when you prepare, and that's your own brain, your own experience, your own knowledge, to be able to bring you to this event to support the group and the mission that you're there to support. And as part of supporting that, you need to think about your own safety. Now, in this case, we were operating out in the Mojave Desert, and I had not spent any time out there, and I didn't really know this, but the winds blow out there, go figure, and it blows up a lot of really fine dust. I ended up wearing a mask the entire time because I couldn't breathe with all of that very fine particulate dust. If you're going to be operating outside, make sure you've got a hat, make sure you've got a safety vest so that you can be seen when you're operating, good sunglasses so that you can see. After this deployment, one of the very first things that I went out and bought for my deployment kits, I've got a set of desert goggles, essentially, that I can wear to protect my eyes, because I found it very difficult to be able to just see when the dust kicked up out in the desert. Once I was able to breathe with the mask, it was still very difficult to be able to see. So now I've got a set of goggles that I can wear over top. Your own personal safety is really key to your success for being able to support your mission and the people who you're supporting. Now, along with that, what are the creature comforts? What are the things that you need to really be comfortable? On this particular deployment, we had to be on station by about 5 o'clock in the morning. Well, there wasn't a whole lot of services that were open and available to be able to get coffee. So I brought the equipment that I would need in order to be able to make coffee out in the field. And I didn't get real fancy with any of this. You can see what I used was literally a small, simple little funnel out of the kitchen, just a coffee filter stuck in that. I had some ground coffee, and then I needed a way to boil water to be able to make a hot cup of coffee, because that's something that gave me comfort and would help me get through the day. I brought along with me a small little camp stove that I could be able to set up, be able to create the hot water to make the coffee. You'll notice that when I was talking about the winds that we had out there in the desert, I had to improvise a solution while I was there, because I couldn't actually keep the stove running because the winds were blowing too hard. So I used the crates that I would pack my gear in order to create a little small wind block in order to heat up the water and to be able to make the coffee. That was something that was going to keep me comfortable while I was out there operating in the field. So in this situation, I ended up I needed to bring my truck. I was operating out of my vehicle the entire time. And so I had a way to be able to transport your gear. When you start thinking about the gear that you're going to bring with you, if you do not have an organizational structure, a way to be able to find that gear, it's just like not having the gear with you. So you can see on these boxes, there's these little bits of tape, and there's tape actually on both ends of the boxes that has a basic label that says what this particular kit contains. I've also got a label on the top of each box. So depending on how they get stacked in the back of the truck, I can crawl back there, and if I'm looking over the top, I can see what's in this kit. If I'm looking from the end of the truck, I can see what's in which kit in order to pull that out. And then inside of those, I've got additional smaller kits that are organized to be able to find the gear that I need to get access to. And I brought just enough. I was able to organize my gear in a way that it would all fit inside of my vehicle for this particular deployment. So what are the types? What are the general categories here? Well, this is that idea of creating kits of kits. So I had radio kits with me, not just a single radio or a single antenna kit. I'd create these smaller kits that have the different components that I would need. In this case, I had tech kits with me, things to be able to troubleshoot and problem solve for the mission that we were going after and to support the people who we were going there to support. You have the personal kits, the things that are the creature comforts that you need for you to be operating at your best, because ultimately it's your own personal experience and ingenuity that is the most valuable item in your particular deployment kit. So how do you pack all this stuff? Well, you pack it by probably, in this case, lots of different boxes, packages, crates, whatever you want, and a series of different bags. In this case, not only did I have the larger kits set up inside of the vehicle, but I had a very small backpack that once I would pull up to a different stage, I could throw the backpack on and it would have the key essential components that I was likely to be able to need for that close transport. So I wasn't having to run back and forth to the vehicle all the time. I would have the stuff I was likely to need in the small backpack. And then in this case, yeah, you're probably going to need a truck to carry this or a larger vehicle, whatever it is that is appropriate for that type of equipment. At a later version of this past spring at Baker to Vegas, for those of you who have been following us for a while, you know we set up the WaveTalkers solar powered gateway out at Baker to Vegas, and that entailed an entirely different set of equipment and needs that we worked through and we set up. You can go back and you can see some of those episodes to see how we prepared for that deployment. And in fact, if you go back to the solar panel episode, the solar power gateway episode, if you watch the previous 4 or 5 episodes, that's the preparation that we all went through as we got ready to go to Baker to Vegas this year. And so you can see a more detailed version of what we did to prepare. But while we were there, and this is another big key for you, is take advantage of the opportunities that present themselves. So while we were out at Baker to Vegas, we have the solar powered gateway set up. We met John from Cal OES, and he was really impressed with the setup that we had, and he said, hey, why don't you guys come down to San Diego? We've got a demonstration that we're going to be doing, and we'd love to have you come down, set up the solar powered gateway, and help us do passing traffic between San Diego and Sacramento and show that message passing and Winlink traffic. But here's a twist to all of this. We'd love you to be able to do this on the Shares network as opposed to just using amateur radio. So this required a whole different level of preparation for us to be able to prepare for this particular deployment. One of the things we had to do was to, first of all, modify the amateur radio equipment that we had so we could operate on the Shares frequencies. So I went to HRO, I took my 7300, I had the Mars mod done for it so we could open up the frequencies on it so we could transmit on those other frequencies. We had to make sure that those were working. We also wanted to use Pactor modem. So we, through the Winlink development team, they connected us with some folks who was able to loan us out some Pactor modem so we could then practice and do a setup. This is actually in the hotel room in San Diego where we were doing some of the initial testing. You'd never want to get out in the field and do your first testing. You want to do it beforehand. You want to make sure your equipment works and all the bugs are worked out so that when you get out in the field, when you get out on your deployment, you are ready to go the second that you arrive and you're ready to deploy it. So this was one of the little differences that we had. And then we set up and we operated the solar powered gateway. This is it set up down in San Diego, and it was operating passing traffic through Shares, through a variety of different frequencies on up to the main EOC up in Sacramento. And this was what our overall setup was. There you can see where we were adjacent to Cal OES. We were partnered with them for this deployment. But as part of this setup, You'll notice that we've changed over from those black and yellow boxes that we had gear packed in. I've got a lot more now Pelicans that my gear is a little bit better organized in. I also have a variety of different boxes, and you can start to see these bright orange tags that are all over the place. And if you watched a few of our other episodes, you've seen some of these on my gear as well. Here I'm using rolls of gaff tape, which is it's kind of like a cloth duct tape, if you will. And I use this bright orange color because it's nice and easy to see. And I group gear into essentially piles, for lack of a better term. And I'll group them together so that I know, okay, all my coax is in this particular box. And there's a big label on the top that says coax, or all of my wire antennas are all in this bag. And there's a big label on that. So I know here in my garage, when I go out there, I've got a bunch of those a bunch of shelves in there, and I can have all of my gear kind of organized into these rough piles, if you will. And then I can go in and say, okay, for this particular deployment, I'm going to need this, I'm going to need that. And I can quickly grab those components off of the shelf, and they all kind of get shoved into the back of the truck for transport. In this particular case, we also needed to bring shelter with us. We've got an easy up there, a table for easy operation and setup. We also had some chairs to be able to sit on. We actually use the back of the truck and the tailgate of the truck to be the platform to put the solar powered gateway on. It provided a lot of protection for it, as well as gave us a comfortable place to be able to operate as members of the public and other hams were coming up to see what it was that we were doing. With our overall station, how we had it set up here, you can see the kind of bigger layout that we had. And we did plan out, we went out the day before to the location to plan out where we were going to put the antennas. We set up the buddy hex here, and we also had another mast that was set up down on the beach so that we could run the EmComm 3, which is a wire antenna that ran down here to get some additional frequencies that we were going to operate on using the shared frequencies. And we had our power set up with the solar panels over here. So we created a fully functional setup, but it took a lot of planning to be able to get there. So for this particular deployment, we used expanded radio kits. We took our regular radio kits that we had, we modified them, we expanded them to meet the needs of this particular mission, how this mission was going to be panning out. We brought things like shelters, tables, chairs, all of that kind of stuff. And we had to have a better organized set of crew gear because we had more people that we were going to be interacting with, and we were going to be interacting with a partner organization, in this case, Cal OES, to be able to be in. And so being able to say, hey, I need the whatever thing, being able to give a clear set of instructions as to where that equipment is and where that person would be able to find it ended up being a real key to success for this particular deployment. And once again, experience and ingenuity, these are the things that you bring with you as an operator all the time. And this comes from practice and experience. There's no other way to get this. Build that experience, build that practice, so you're better able to support your mission. Here's our gear, and one of the big take homes from this was the key to having those nice big giant labels so other members of the crew that we assembled would be able to find that equipment and work with it. Once you make the transition between just bringing your own personal gear to supporting an entire team, you need to start thinking about these different levels of organization for the equipment that you have going here. And of course, we needed a truck to be able to do that. Now, these are all practice deployments that we've been talking about here, different ways to prepare yourself for going out and deploying. But what about an actual emergency deployment? Well, I have been on an emergency deployment. I've only been a ham for a few years and involved with emergency communications for a couple of years. But the first deployment that I got activated for, I set up in my backyard. I literally, I was outside of the disaster zone. There was a large fire that broke out in the Los Angeles area. I support one of the Aries teams there in Los Angeles, and I was able to communicate into the area. I had access to the internet. I had access to additional information. So I operated as the net control operator from my backyard. My setup was pretty straightforward. I set up an antenna there in the yard with a tall mast that I had. I set up my VHF antenna so I would be able to communicate with the other members of the team that were deployed. I had access to the internet, so I could do things like monitor the weather situation, monitor the wind, monitor the traffic coming in on social media and other news feeds. I had my scanner handy so I could listen to the emergency traffic that was going on, and I could relay information as need be, take notes and write down what needed to happen. So in this situation, my deployment kit was pretty straightforward. I had everything right there available to me. I had my radio, battery, antenna, and mast. I had commercial power if I needed it, had all the resources. And if I needed to go, everything was packed up in a way that I could get out pretty quickly. The paperwork, as we mentioned before, paperwork is one of those things that you really always want to make sure that you've got copies of all of the common forms that you're likely to need for the group that you're supporting. In this case, I had my computer, I had access to the internet, so I could leverage all of those resources. And for transporting, well, I didn't have to transport anything. I was at my own home, so I had access to everything that I needed. The challenge there was, do you know where all of your gear is? Do you know where that extra little wire adapter thingamabob is in order to make your gear work? So you still need to keep yourself organized and have your gear structured, ready to be able to deploy, even if that deployment is right there in your backyard. So with that, let me switch over to, let's bring David up to be able to talk a little bit about some other deployments scenarios.
Thanks, Chris. Am I here?
You are.
Can you hear me? Is that a no?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Very good. So, as Chris said, we in Southern California, we have to train hard. We have to do a lot of testing. We have to do a lot of activities because on the deployment front, as Chris said, the one time that I was actually deployed was to my garage. And we had a valley-wide power outage that affected a couple of our hospitals. And I was just outside. I was able to catch a radio call that this was going on and needed support, and we spun up net control from my garage and was able to provide relay traffic from the hospitals and support them. But stepping back to think about, well, what would I do? What do we do? How do we plan for these unknown events? It's really, a lot of it's based on the public service we do. And a lot of the public service we do is because we want to be prepared for when the community needs us. So races like AC 100 or Baker to Vegas, some of the things that I do with scouts, Jamboree on the Air, setting up in the middle of nowhere such that you can simulate a disaster or provide service for a mission, is what I like to call it. What's the mission? What do we need to do today? We're going to go up on this hill, or we're going to go to this parking lot, we're going to go to this location, and we're going to have to pass traffic, important traffic, for X number of hours. And X number of hours could be just 2 or 3 or 5 or 6 or 24 or 48, 72. And as the time grows longer, the thought process in your head around what is it that I need to take? What do I need to pack? What do we need to have prepared for is very different. It changes a lot. And we kind of already stepped through this month. I have my first something happened, grab me bag. That's what I need to live on for 2 days. If I don't have anything else, there's enough stuff in there that I have my medications, I can sleep, I can brush my teeth, I got deodorant, I've got all of the little things. I've got an amateur radio where I could be okay for a short period of time. And then for every different activity that we need to add to that or other event we need to support, I grab another bag and another bag and another bag. And as Chris said, we have, and I really call them piles. Mine are bins. There are, I guess, a couple of piles because there are things that don't actually live in a bin because they're too big to go in a bin. But I think about, I'm going to the middle of the of Death Valley, literally, for 24 hours. And I'm going to set up a place where there is no communications, and I need to be able to pass important communications for a period of that 24 hours. And I need to be able to do it without any support, without any landlines, without any internet, without any running water or any other niceties that you'd get in the big city. Now, we do get pizza delivery because we're just inside of the pizza delivery range. But the rest of the stuff we bring her along, and that's the Baker to Vegas race that we support every year. And I've been doing it for almost 10 years now. We literally set up a little city in the middle of the desert. And there's a lot of thought leading up into events like that about what do I take? What do I need? What didn't I have last year or the year before? Because every year your kit grows a little bit. And having had that experience year after year and doing other races that are in different locations with different limitations helps you build out what are the little things that you need, such that if there's an earthquake, or as we had here in my community yesterday, we had a wildfire, and it only hit 6 acres, but the helicopters were over my home rattling the windows for an hour and a half while they were trying to put the fire out. And there was a point where we thought, okay, there's the something happened bag needs to go in my car, and there's our important papers file that probably needs to go in the car. Do we need to go to the next level? Will we get the cat carriers out and dump our dirty laundry into a duffel bag so that we have clothes to wear? We didn't quite make it there because it only stopped at about 6 acres, and it was a mile from us. So, we had a little bit of time, but we didn't go there. Had this been a big wildfire like we had for Woolsey, where it was days and freeways were closed and power was lost and those other things, I might have been deployed to go to one of our local hospitals. And if that was the case, I would have stood in front of my piles for maybe about 10 minutes, kind of sizing up. I need this, I need that. There's a tent and a sleeping bag, and I need radios, and maybe the 20 amp hour batteries aren't going to cut it. I'll drag out the 100 amp hour batteries, or maybe the 185 amp hour batteries if I can find somebody in the house to help me lift it in the back of my truck and strap it down so it doesn't go flopping around. And all of the other cascading things you might need to do the job that you need to do. And then when you get to the location where you're going to set up, there's also a consideration about what do we do as far as setup. I have deployed a whole bunch of times where my vehicle is literally the radio station. And every once in a while, I think to myself, I'm not doing myself a service that if I had to drop everything and go, it's going to take me a little longer to unplug it all. And if I had to, I would, and just dump it and leave it. It'll be there when I get back or not. It doesn't matter. But thinking through what are those things we need to do to prepare such that the pile of things that we have ready to go, makes sense. You know what you need to take. You don't take the stuff that's not important, but you do get all the stuff that is important. Because, as Chris's experience and my experience was when we actually had to deploy for real world situations, we were at our homes. And if it turned out as we were getting set up and getting ready to get on the air, we were missing this connector or that cable or this microphone or that battery thing, we'd just really get up from our seat, walk into the garage or our shack, grab it and come back. If you get deployed to a location, you may be minutes, miles, hours from wherever, your pile of stuff is. And if you didn't bring that critical thing, you have to go back to Chris's most important part of, you got to use your brain to be able to punt in the environment. And we've done that as well. So lots of things to take along. I've seen lots of comments in the chat. Yeah. Pencils, clipboards, paper. I've got we talked about our files. This is my packet of hospital files that we have to use that I replenish every time we go out. Radios, batteries, sleeping bags, hats, sunscreen, water, food, all of those things. They're all a consideration. And you really have to sit down with yourself and think about, what may I be asked to do? And based on what I might get asked to do, what are the things that I should show up at that event looking like I know what I'm doing? So you're not having to go in and say, hey, you have a pencil? You got a pad of paper? hey, I didn't bring any toilet paper. Hey, do you have water? I mean, there's all the things that go along with that. Literally, I've learned every year when we go either any of the races we do, Baker to Vegas, which is in the middle of nowhere, or AC 100, which is in the middle of nowhere, although there are forestry service toilets there. Every year we've learned bring a pack, and not just a little pack of toilet paper, but a big pack to share with your friends and neighbors, because in those locations, those are those kind of scarce commodities that people will need. And it's always nice if you show up with something to share. So you're on mute, Chris. I'm sure that never happened before.
Never happened before. I even have a pop-up that says, would you like to unmute yourself? So if you're deployed, I know you're on one side of the 101.
Yeah.
And the hospital that you primarily support, it's not too far. It's what, 3 miles from here?
It's a little bit more than 3 miles away, and it is on the other side of the freeway.
So in Southern California, I mean, one of the things that we have to deal with here a lot is earthquakes and fires. Earthquakes can take out the freeway system, so you might not be able to get your vehicle there. How else would you get to the deployment?
Yeah, you know, where I am in the San Fernando Valley, there are probably within 6 miles a dozen places where I could get under or over the freeway, such that I could transit to where the hospital is. And there's only, through that stretch of the valley, there's only those one spots where there's, you know, an elevated, either an overpass or an underpass that you have to go through. So, you know, I'd start with the shortest route, and then, you know, move down to the next one and the next one and the next one until you get there. I have ridden my bike to that hospital before. And while that is an option, it definitely limits the amount of gear that I would show up with in a timely manner. And then honestly, I'm a mile from the freeway. The hospital's 2.5 miles on the other side of the freeway. If it's so bad that the freeway's down there, I'm probably not going to be in as good a shape at home. So who knows what I'll be able to do, if I'll be able to show up or not. So yeah, I mean, and those are the considerations, and there are things that we've thought about. You know, depending on the situation that the hospital's in, we may show up at the, you know, the scout, the church that our scout troop meets at. There's a food pantry there, and they already feed, you know, 800 families every week. You know, in a disaster situation, that will grow, you know, on a factor of 10 probably for the first, you know, 48 hours or so. And that may be another different place that we would deploy, and that, you know, that's one of those places which would likely become a Red Cross shelter. So
nice. Hey Dan, if you could, two things. One, if you could tell us a little bit about, I know Marty N6VI, there's a story about him having to deploy, but then if you can also talk us through about how you prepare checklists and so forth, because that's, I think, one of the biggest keys here. Let me bring you up there.
Sure. Well, the Marty story is sort of how things go. He had returned from some kind of event. I think it might even have been Baker to Vegas, and he had not unloaded his car yet. And that night, we had an ongoing brush fire, and it came down and was threatening Olive View Hospital, which is a very large county hospital here in the valley. And they had lost power right about the time they had to evacuate. And so the call went out. Marty got in a car and basically had to zigzag around roadblocks, but he ultimately couldn't get all that close to the hospital. And so he ended up having to look at his equipment and make a quick inventory and a quick decision about what do I absolutely need. It used to be that a lot of our hospitals had radio rooms, and so you could go and show up and hopefully everything was left as you left it. Rarely was that the case, but anyway, but as the hospitals have grown and room has become important, a lot of the radio rooms have gotten eliminated. So anyway, Marty grabbed what he could. He got as close as he could with his car and grabbed what he could and made it to the hospital. And of course, the security people, who are you? And, we don't know you. You're not on our list, sort of thing. But he basically ended up, I'm here to set up communications. You can let me in and I can help solve the problem, or you can send me away and explain it to your boss. And they let him in, and he was able to set up comms. Another member made their way down to the medic alert center. And during that evacuation period, you can imagine evacuating a large hospital. He was able to provide the communications that they needed, and was able to solve their problem for that time until they were able to. Two things happened about the same time. They got some communications back and power back, and the fire was held. They actually lost some outbuildings, but the hospital itself was saved. So Chris had mentioned checklists, and this is something I came up. This is not something an ongoing project. I came up with it today because we had talked about documenting, and I really like spreadsheet programs. I use it to make forms. I use it to make lists, and I came up with this real quickly, and I wanted to show you how I did it a little bit, and how you can use it. As you can see on the form here, I've got my communications checklist, but if you look at the bottom of the screen here, you can see I've got additional sheets in it. This is personal items. I have transportation. How are you going to get there? Are you going to go by car or truck? Are you going to go by motorcycle, bicycle? Are you going to walk? And, list the kind of things that you might want for that. Documentation. They say that if it isn't written down, it didn't happen. So here you've got your forms for your agency. You've got your forms for your group. You've got maybe allied agencies. When I deploy as LA City ACS, we have to interact with our other partner groups. The hospitals may need to make contact with the fire department. That would probably go through those of us at ACS. So we need to have forms that they use so that we can pass those things on. And then, of course, the big thing is note-taking. If you've got enough pencils and a yellow legal pad, you can make up for the lack of having the right form and eventually transfer the information to that form, although it certainly is easier to have the right form. So anyway, I'm using LibreOffice here. That's a free Office program that is excellent, and it's 99% compatible with Microsoft Office. I created this form in Microsoft Office, but I'm displaying it here on LibreOffice. To add tabs to this is very easy. You take the raw tab that you want to work with, say documentation, click make a copy, and then you can either move, or if you want to copy that, and where do you want it? I want to move it to the end position. And now it's made a copy of that documentation form. I can right click on the label and rename it. So maybe we want a miscellaneous. Rename that. And then we can go through and edit that form to our uses. So really easy to work with. If I need more lines on the form, I can right click on a line and insert rows above, and I've got a raw row to add details. Now you can see I used several columns to make up one of my form columns, but all you do is just merge these two together, and that gives you that. Another thing I'd recommend on these forms is that you make the raw form a read-only form so you don't accidentally erase your basic form. And that's pretty easy to do. You just go into your file explorer and find your form. In this case, it shows as recent files. If I right click on that and go to properties at the bottom, I can click read only here, apply that. Now, when I fill that form in, it will force me to save the new version under a different name, so I don't accidentally erase or have to go through and erase all the fields that I made. So that's basically how I do this. Everybody's personal. Everything is different. You know, I might make another form for if I'm deployed to the EOC, where we already have radios and where the EOC people are responsible for taking care of food, but there might be other considerations. Maybe you know that a place that you're deployed is particularly cold. You might add a heavy jacket for that kind of thing. So it's really easy to do. And like I say, whether you have Excel in Microsoft Office, or you have LibreOffice. OpenOffice is another good free program that's mostly compatible with Microsoft Office, and you can move move your files around, and they will mostly open up the same as in the original software. You may have to tweak a little bit, but anyway, that's that. I think it works out real well. I've got a column here for whether you've checked it, if it's in a bag and you want to go and check and make sure that it's still there, the batteries are still current, any food that's in there isn't past its check by date, and then whether you've loaded it into your vehicle, you can check that off. So that's really all I had, unless Chris or David have questions or suggestions.
Yeah, I see this is a great form that you've laid out here, Dan. I think a couple of things that that some operators would maybe want to consider adding on to this. You may want to add for your gear list of inventory, your checklist for that, having a column for your serial numbers, so you can note down what the serial numbers are for all of your particular gear that you have. When we talked about packing and preparing your gear, I noted that on a lot of mine, I put the nice yellow or nice orange tags on them, so it's easy for me to visually see, like, oh, hey, that's one of my pieces of equipment. Put your name on it, or a sticker that has your common contact information, so that you can identify it, especially when you get deployed, if you're deploying with other people, so you can keep track of what your gear is, and kind of where everything is. Having things like your serial numbers written down, really helpful. Having just other information about your gear. You may want to keep an inventory. Like if you use in your garage, I talked about the shelves that I have that are set up. I could see using this and having just a clipboard out there, where I've got different forms like this taped to the outside of the box, so I could see, like, okay, what's in the box really quickly if I know I need to grab this or that or whatever out of there, or if I'm just going to take the whole thing along with me. So some of those are pretty helpful.
Yeah,
Dan,
one thing, Chris, that you made me think of, and that could go in the comments column, or you could make a separate column for it, would be, which box did you put it in?
Yeah.
You might want to number your boxes, or as Chris said, label your boxes, and you could put in, radio box.
Yeah.
Like that.
We'll take this base form that Dan's gotten started here. We'll put it up in the show notes on WaveTalkers. If you'd like to be able to download it and access it, you're welcome to.
And as you add columns like I did here, you're going to probably have to format it a little bit to see. Here's my print view, and you can see everything is still in the screen there, but you might have to go through and take this item column and shrink it a little bit in order to get everything. You can see the indication here for the edge of the page. So it's after you've played with these spreadsheet programs a little bit, it's really pretty easy to manipulate them. And it's really a handy feature. Once you've created the form, then all you do is apply it to whatever your particular mission is for that deployment.
So like I said, we'll put this up in an Excel format, and with Excel, you don't have to have Excel. You can take an Excel document, you can load it onto, say, Google Docs, and it'll open up as a Google Sheet. You can open it up in LibreOffice, which is free and available on multiple platforms as well. You can open it up even in Apple Numbers. It'll work and open up in that as well. So that's great. Thanks a lot, Dan. Let me do a quick little check real quick of the check-ins that we've gotten. So let's jump back over to that. We'll do one more quick check here of all of the check-ins. Make sure everybody's gotten their forms in. I see there comes Bill coming in from Hawaii. Thank you very much, Bill, for sending that check-in. I'll do one more quick check here, and then we'll bring up the map and see where folks are coming in from. And we do keep checking all week long and responding to the messages each week. So in order to map these, just come up here to the toolbar. You're going to click on the little globe icon. And you have to make sure that you're receiving the form. So this is going to work for me because I'm one of the people who received these forms. You sent it to both to my call sign and also to our tactical call sign. So these forms are available for me. If you would like to be able to do this with your own group, just have them send all of the check-in forms directly to your call sign. And then when you click on the drop down here, select form, you'll see the forms that you've received into your particular copy of Winlink's inbox. So I'm going to select the Winlink check-in forms. You can, of course, choose which map provider that you're looking at. And in case you're wondering, if you get deployed, it's a good idea to be able to check your forms, open them up in the map of your choice while you still have internet. It's all about preparing. So prepare by going on to your local region, create the map, zoom into it, and Winlink will actually cache those map tiles. So if you get deployed and you're out there and you don't have access to the internet, this still will work. The Winlink team has done a great job in pulling this together. So I'm using the Google Maps here. I'm just going to hit display map, and there we go. If the demo gods are with us, it brings up. Let me zoom out to the entire planet, zoom it out to full screen. I'm going to right click and drag. And there we go. It gives us a view of the whole planet. It's always a good idea to double check your filters that you have set up. So if you come up here to the upper left, you can click on set filters, and you can see we're only looking at any forms that have come in, any of the Winlink check-in forms that have come in the last 10 hours. But you've got a lot of control over selecting those and even selecting some of these other filters that are in here. We've got a great video up on our YouTube channel that shows how to use all of these filters that are here. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And let's have a look and see what we've got. We've got a couple of people out here in Hawaii, WH6FQQ, and looks like Bill KH6UU. Aloha. Thanks for joining us out there in Hawaii. Looks like Terry down there in ZL land, coming in from New Zealand, is joining. ZL1 HOG. Thanks a lot for joining. Over here in New Zealand, Indonesia, we've got Delta Whiskey 1 Oscar Tango Tango joining us. Thanks a lot. I saw some traffic earlier this week that you guys have gotten your own Winlink gateways set up there in Indonesia now, and you're able to start to pass some of your own traffic there via RF. That's a great congratulations on getting that set up, and thanks for letting us know that you've gotten that going. Really thrilled to see all of that progress. A bunch of our folks here out in Europe, Oscar Echo 1 Lima Hotel Papa, and Franz Oscar Echo 3 Foxtrot Quebec Uniform. There's Roland joining us from Germany. And let's go ahead and zoom in on North America here and see where we've got folks coming in from. I'll just zoom in a few times, right click and drag while holding that right click mouse button down. We've got some folks here coming in Florida down there. Keep an eye on the weather. There is that the hurricane that's coming up kind of pointing right at you. So hopefully you'll be prepared and safe for that. and folks coming in from all over North America. I'm just going to go ahead and roll over some of these to just go ahead and make sure we can see everybody coming in. We've got a couple of we got a new folk up here in Canada. Victor Alpha 3 Zulu Echo Victor. Hey, thanks for joining us there. We've got folks coming in Michigan, Ohio. Looks like Steve down there in Tennessee. Thanks for joining us as always. Several coming in over here in Iowa. Thanks for joining us there. A few more up here in Idaho. Hey, thanks for joining us up there. And folks coming in all over the place. Really loving that. Just going to roll over a few of these. We can get everybody up. Glad to see folks signing in. A large contingent up here in Northern California. Hey, Greg, how you doing? And some folks coming in from all over. We've got a lot of folks here in Southern California. We'll just roll over a few of those. It looks like Arizona, Nevada area. Excellent. Great to see you. Hey, there's John down there in Texas, and looks like King joining us there as well. Hey, thanks a lot. So, hey, if you find the stuff that we're doing here really helpful, one of the best ways you can support us is by going onto our YouTube channel, like the content, engage with the content there. That really helps get more people to be able to see it. If you really find the stuff that we're doing very helpful to you, then please go on to wavetalkers.com. We've got a little buy us a coffee link. You're welcome to support us that way as well. It takes quite a bit to keep all this infrastructure up and running. We really appreciate everybody who's supporting us, and that can be either watching us either on YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn or here live in the Zoom. And if you want to join us in the Zoom at any point, just make sure you go on to WaveTalkers, go down to the bottom of the page. There's a join us link, and you'll get onto our mailing list. We send out the link every week to our Zoom session, so you're able to join us live and participate in the after party here with us. So let me jump back up into the main view. I'm going to bring the guys back up, and we'll add their spotlights back up as we get up here near the top of the hour. And David, what are your thoughts to wrap us up for today? You're on mute still. Turnabout fair play. You're still on mute.
I just unclicked mute. Am I off mute now? I looked at it. I said, click the mute. I did. I think when you think about preparedness, and that's what we kind of talked about all month, it's not a last minute thing. If you're thinking about it in the event, it's too late. Think about it, plan ahead. We all have our piles of stuff, and start with that something happened bag. Everybody should have that something happened bag. And if you have it, that's great. If your significant other, spouse or whatever doesn't have it, help them get it going and go it forward. And then as you think about what you may be asked to do or need to do in your community, plan accordingly for those events. Put together your bags or piles or things. It's important. And then once you build it and you think it's good, take it out in your driveway, play with it. You'll figure out that there are 1 or 2 or 3 or 6 things you forgot, and more power to you. It will make you better in the next time you take it out in the driveway and play with it, and or need to actually show up and use it for some kind of event or activity. So I think that's it for me. Back to net control.
Thank you, W0DSG. Dan, what kind of thoughts do you got?
One of my biggest challenges in organizing this stuff is that I come back from an event or a deployment or whatever. I'm tired. I need to unload my car, and I typically end up just throwing stuff up on shelves. And unless I make a concerted effort to get back to it and organize it, the next time I go to it, I don't have that ease of finding things because not everything's in its place. I do I do have a rack set up that my larger equipment all goes on. And in theory, I can go to that rack just like going to Home Depot and picking stuff off the shelf. I need one of these, two of these. But the reality is that lots of times when I come back from an event, I throw stuff where it's easiest thrown, which actually is kind of the way Home Depots are, because people have taken stuff, oh, this is the wrong one, and they put it back in the wrong place. So my garage is like a Home Depot. But no, I need to do better with that. And lists are great, but I think the better you're organized, the better you can implement those lists.
Yeah, I agree. What comes to mind for me, kind of wrapping up this National Emergency Preparedness Month, is to reflect back a little bit on what we covered this month. So we kicked off the month by talking about situational awareness, talking about ways to keep yourself situationally aware of what's going on, learning to use the tools that we use every day to be able to find information about what's going on in your area, in your community, using things like Twitter and the National Weather Service and reading weather charts, all of those, staying in contact with the other hams in your group and your agencies, keeping your pulse, keeping your finger on the pulse of what is going on. It's really key to setting up so that you're informed, you're able to be prepared. So in the event that you need to get out quickly, you've got your kit that's ready to go to evacuate out. You've got plans for your family to be able to get out safely, to regroup in another area, to reach out and contact your remote, your out of area contact, so that they know that you're safe and you can have whatever information pass that you need to. Practice doing deployments, going out, doing tests with your local Aries group or your EmComm group, whatever that happens to be. Working with your agencies to do interoperable exercises to make sure that you can communicate back and forth between different channels and you're able to support each other, and go out and just keep practicing with all of the different equipment that you have, so that you always know kind of what's available and how to be able to operate all of it. It really is a big key to success. So I'd like to thank everybody who joined us this month. We're going to switch gears for next month, and we're going to talk about another topic besides Emergency Preparedness Month. I think we're going to be talking about antennas. We've gotten a lot of requests to talk about antennas. So that's kind of the direction that we've been moving. We did a little recon yesterday, and we found a spot to be able to go out and do some testing. So we're very excited to start working on some of that content for you. So again, thanks a lot, everyone, for joining. If you're here inside of the Zoom, hang around for the after party. We'll open up the mics and we'll take your questions and chat and have a good time there for a little while. And with that, we'll say 7-3 to everyone who's out there on all the live streams. Please consider giving us a like if you found this helpful, and leave us a comment. We'd love to engage with you online and join us here inside of the Zoom, possibly for next week. So thanks a lot, everyone. 7-3. We'll see you next week.
7-3, everybody.